So recently, yesterday, as of me recording this as a matter of fact, I had the opportunity to go to something called the Van Gogh Experience. It is an art exhibit that is dedicated 100% to the painter Vincent van Gogh. And it was probably one of my favorite things that I've ever done. By the end of it, you enter this very large room that you are allowed to stay in for as long as you want. It plays this overwhelming, calming music, and you are engrossed within the paintings of Van Gogh in this kind of motion graphic projector style. And it was, like I said, it was amazing. It was a great experience. Except for the fact that some woman was letting her children run around screaming and playing during the entire thing. Now, I want to start this entire video off by saying that I fully believe that children should be able to have these experiences. And I also fully believe that it is not the fault of the child if they are running wild and rambunctious. I believe that it is the fault of the parent. Now, that 15-second clip that I just showed you doesn't even begin to do it justice, because I didn't want to just actually film the children, because I want you guys to understand how weird that is. I always find it odd when people just whip out their phones and start filming other people and their actions in public, and I especially find it weird to film children and put them on the internet, no matter how rambunctious they're getting. I also was trying my best to enjoy the show, but for about 15 to 20 minutes, these children were running back and forth, throwing themselves onto some of the beanbag chairs so that nobody else was able to utilize them, and they were running into walls. They would run up to people and just start babbling at the people who were just trying to enjoy their time. I was even one of them. The kids at one point ran up to me to ask me how old I was, and I'm not going to be mean to a child. I refuse to punish a child for the fact that their parents refused to teach them any better. But by the end of the point where the children were walking out, I was so unbelievably frustrated that I was only able to enjoy the experience for maybe another 10 minutes before I was just mentally drained, because the first 20 minutes that I was in there was filled with nothing but these children screaming at the top of their lungs. And I ended up posting that 15-second video to TikTok with the caption that it is incredibly disrespectful to allow your children to run around screaming at an art exhibit and not teach them any manners. And while quite a few people were on my side and understood where I was coming from, there were also quite a few people who I have since blocked because I don't feel like explaining to grown-ass human beings why you should control your fucking kids. But they were all like, oh, it's just children being children. Oh, the children are laughing. Why are you mad? Oh, blah, 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 blah. Because it's a quiet place. When I was growing up, I was a very hyperactive child. One of the biggest things that I did was run around and scream, because that's simply what children do. Children are incredibly energetic beings. They have a lot of energy. They're still growing into themselves. They're still learning about society. They're still learning about things. And so they're going to get excited. And especially in something like this, where there's a lot of pretty lights and motion and colors and things like that, especially to a young toddler's mind, this is going to be something that's very exciting for them. And I understand that. And again, I think that children should experience things like this, because it might, and in fact, it will actually inspire some of them to become artists. There's going to be at least one child who is going to go to this exhibit, who is going to see all of these beautiful colors and see all of these beautiful paintings and want to become a painter because of that. In fact, there's probably going to be more than a few children who will grow up with Van Gogh being their favorite painter because they got to experience this when they were young. However, I think as the parent, you have a responsibility to teach your children better. The entire time this was happening, the mother was sitting on her phone texting what was no doubt either the children's father while he was stuck at work, or some guy who she was hoping to come in and step in for the father. And I know that sounds incredibly mean and rude to a woman who I know nothing about, but that's about the only thing that I can think of for why she was allowing 3 children to cause so much havoc during what was supposed to be a quiet time. And every time the children would run up to her, she would wave her hand off to the side without even taking the time to look up from her phone and look at them. This was a very neglectful mother, a person who very obviously was just trying to find a way to get her children to run around and leave her alone. And if you need a break like that, if you need to be able to let your children run free while you're in your own little world, I understand that. It's one of the reasons that I don't want to have children, because I don't have the patience for that. But you don't bring them to an art exhibit for that. You bring them to a park or a public play area, or there are children's museums where children are allowed to do that, because you're not expected at a children's museum to control the kids while people are trying to enjoy the exhibits, because the entire building is built for children to be able to play. I remember when I was younger, I went to a children's museum and it was full of basically fairground rides, right? Like there was this little wind tunnel that you could stand in, and you could crawl through this big place that had dinosaur facts and things, and there was a little shopping area which was also really cool, not like a gift shop, but it had plastic foods and stuff, and so it kind of was there to teach children about math and things. It was just one of those really cool experiences that I think that every child should get the chance to experience. There are tons of places out there where you can bring your children, but the three main places where if you're going to bring your children you need to teach them manners is the library, movie theaters, and museums. And that's what this was. Even though this is kind of one of those traveling type of things where they're in one spot for a month or two and then they pack everything up and they bring it to a different city and it kind of, goes around. It's still a museum. It's still an exhibit. It's a place for you to go and immerse yourself within the life and times of Van Gogh. It's a place for you to lose yourself within the paintings and really get into his mind. The more that I studied on Van Gogh when I was doing the walkthrough portion of the exhibit, the more I realized how extremely tortured he was as a person. His life and story was very interesting, and I won't get into all that now because it's not what this video is about, but I think that it's just incredibly frustrating to me how so many parents will just allow their children to act out. And there's going to be some boomer-headed moron that's going to get into the comments, or Gen X moron that's going to get into the comments and be like, yeah, it's because people don't beat their kids like they used to, which is just cringe on its own, right? That's the complete opposite side of the spectrum. People who hit their children as a form of discipline are just as bad as people who let their children run rampant and just scream and ruin other people's experiences. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to teach your children. You're supposed to talk to them. Children are human beings with cognitive brains. They understand words. Now, one of those kids, I think she probably had to be about 1 or 2 years old. She was incredibly tiny, and there probably was no way that you're going to talk her into settling down because she's just too young for that. But in that case, you don't bring her. And if you yourself wanted to come to this because you've always been interested in Van Gogh, then you need to figure out something to do with your kids. You need to give your kids to their grandmother or a friend or pay a babysitter. I'm sorry, the tickets for this thing are $30 a pop. I'm sure you could afford a babysitter for an hour and a half if you were paying $30 to go to this thing. So I find it incredibly incredulous, I think, that you wouldn't just leave your children somewhere, leave them at home. And if you think I was the only one in this entire thing that was frustrated, I was the only person, no, there were plenty of other people around me who were whispering to each other that were very frustrated because the kids were ruining it. There was a couple in the corner who was very obviously on a date, and they were looking into each other's eyes lovingly, and they would, kiss each other lightly, and they were holding hands the whole time, and it was very sweet and a harsh reminder that I'm gonna die alone. But the point is that those people wanted to have a nice evening together. They wanted to have time together where they could lay on that beanbag chair together and they could look up at the Starry Night painting as it had the motion and moved around, and they could see all of these beautiful things to this calming music and just be in each other's presence, which is a love language all of its own. And it got ruined by a toddler running up to them to ask them their names and how old they were. And again, I'm not mad at the kid, and I don't think anybody was mad at the children. We were all mad at the mother. And I honestly think it was only through everybody glaring at the mother that she eventually decided to get up and leave with the children. But we shouldn't have had to do that. Nobody should have had to look upon her judgingly. She should have just had the presence of mind as a grown-ass woman who looked to be about in her mid-30s that she should have been taking care of her children. She should have been teaching them. And it's baffling to me how many parents will go out and just allow their children to disrespect other human beings when they're there. This is not the only time this has happened to me in the past, and I can count at least 5 occasions over the past 3 to 4 years where a child has just started running rampant in a place where they shouldn't. I've gone out to restaurants and had children come out and ask me for a bite of my food, and the mother and the father, sometimes both of them together, are just sitting there laughing at the absurdity when the child doesn't know me and you two don't know me. Now, if I'm out at a restaurant and one of my buddies who has a kid and I know the kid and the kid comes up to me, that's a completely different story, right? But I don't know any of you. I don't know who you are, and so it feels weird to me. And again, I can't bring myself to be mean to a child. Some people in the comments of my TikTok were like, "Oh, you just curse the child out and have them go ask their parents what that means and stuff." But I can't be mean to a child. It's not the child's fault. I don't have that kind of I guess spirit. I don't have that kind of spirit in me, you know? I don't want to be mean to children. But at the end of the day, I felt the need to make this video and kind of rant because I was just so frustrated with the way this woman was so flippant about how her children were acting, and I am so irritated that there are people out there that defend the mother. Like, because the children were laughing, it's supposed to be okay for them to be rambunctious and loud in a space that is not meant to be rambunctious or loud. What I'm saying is that if you wouldn't appreciate your own children interrupting your peace and quiet, why would you bring them out to interrupt other people's peace and quiet?